I want to talk to you about your NPCs in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Nothing brings more life to your world than the NPCs. While your adventuring party is the center focus of the story being told, a non-player character, or NPC, is quite literally everyone else. For every new and experienced DM, populating a world's worth of people can be a daunting task. For example, in the 5th edition adventure, The Curse of Strahd, there are over 100 named NPCs. But how do you make every one of these NPCs a distinctly unique person? How do you remember how you played them with or against your party the first time they met versus the second, the 5th, or the 10th? How can you keep it all together, maintain your composure, and immerse your players in your deeply rich world rife with roleplay material? Well, fundamentally, it's important to recognize that while you're world building, the characters you create are going to be the characters of an epic movie or TV show. It doesn't matter what your favorite franchise or influences are, because the way you approach placing these characters in your campaign is going to essentially be the same. What is it about the supporting characters and villains that make them work? Well, for the most part, they exist only when they're interacting with the protagonists. That doesn't mean that they don't have families, jobs, wants, needs, losses, and fears. But think back to a fantasy show that you loved. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Once Upon a Time, Riverdale. How is it that the recurring characters and villains of these series are so engaging and memorable? The parts of these people that matter to us are how they affect the protagonists of the stories. Anything and everything that they do that does not directly impact the player or doesn't happen in front of the player is only as important as the players make it. It doesn't matter if they had a great dinner with their mother-in-law 2 nights prior. It doesn't matter if they have a heaping pile of gold as their life savings. It doesn't matter how a couple met, fell in love, or got married. It doesn't matter how much of a brat their child is or how far away their favorite relative is. If it doesn't happen in front of your players or if it doesn't inform the story, these details may never come up. That's a lot of talking just to say this. Don't be weighed down by details. So few details are required of things outside the campaign itself. It is your players who are going to be the main characters of the story being spun. It is their direct influence on the world that you've built that shapes the story of your specific campaign. This is one of my favorite things about Dungeons & Dragons. You aren't a video game programmer creating a pathway or two to success. It's the ingenuity of your players, supported by some rules, that get them to the end game. In order to do this, your players will need to make friends and allies. They'll need to stand up to the antagonist. The people around them will need to shift and change in their particular arcs as your players make decisions. Who do you introduce that has the most potential impact on their decisions? Which characters exist for a single purpose? Who has the potential to betray the party? These are questions you have to answer yourself before you sit down with your players for session 1. If the adventuring party are the protagonists, then it's up to you to create an array of supporting characters, whether that be from the stat blocks in the official adventure module or from your own homebrew creations. And you want to create a pyramid of importance for these NPCs. Now, it's necessary to distribute these characters in the pyramid not based on the perceived importance of their profession or their noble status, but by the importance they have on the tale itself. Who your player characters are, their official character backgrounds, whatever story they may have created for themselves, or the overall course and theme of your campaign should have a heavy influence on where these characters fall. And there are 3 tiers: specific purpose, general purpose, and basic purpose. Basic purpose NPCs. Typically, these are your unnamed NPCs, basic guards, shopkeepers, enemies, and the like. These characters help fill space in your world and make it seem more alive around your players. When they're walking down the street and you describe the scene, the drivers of horse-drawn carriages take the affluent through the cobblestone city streets. The smell of freshly baked bread hits your nose as you hear the call, "Just out of the oven, warm and ready." In that alone, you've introduced 3 groups of basic purpose NPCs: carriage drivers, affluent citizens, and the baker. These characters may never do anything but appear in a description. But perhaps a player looking to immerse themselves deeply in the setting will visit the baker to buy a scone. Beyond those minor interactions meant to fill out your setting, these characters won't do much for the overall story past facilitating the buying of supplies and handling everyday local lore, if even that's necessary. There's nothing wrong with saying you visit the blacksmith and spend 10 gold pieces on a new short sword. Not everything requires heavy roleplay in this category. I ran the Frozen Sick. It's one of the introductory adventures in the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. I had the characters set, the hook explained, and the funeral done. But as a new DM, I hadn't come up with anything about anyone that didn't have a name already in the module. The players were meant to investigate a curse spreading through Palebank Village. I knew who had the answers, but they went to talk to the blacksmith in town. I relied on the trope of the dwarven blacksmith. But what could I make of this interaction? How could I make it valuable to the player and not just a showcase of my own lack of preparation? The blacksmith suddenly became anything I wanted him to be, to guide the player in the intended direction. I didn't have to invent anything about the blacksmith past what the character needed from them. Yes, they make fine weapons. Yes, they can appraise ancient metalworking from nearby Eiselcross. No knowledge about the Frozen Sick. But I created a dwarf, and the other NPC with the right information was a dwarf. Well, my old travel mate Tilgi was the most recent to come down with it, up in that cabin there. Maybe bring her some extra wood to throw in her fireplace. I didn't have to do anything with this NPC past this interaction. They aren't anything but what the player needs for the story, and nothing more. General purpose NPCs. These are the lower tier named NPCs, ones that have some development to them. So many interesting NPCs can become important to the plot or to the players, and they come from here. This may also include mini-bosses that your players will face. I like following a rule of one with them. The rule of one is a tool to help keep NPCs different in how they interact with the party, while also bringing a memorable trait to them. It's simple. With the rule of one, you pick one demeanor or point of focus for the NPC, or both if you're feeling frisky. Surly, affable, unserious, confident, dedicated mother, protector of the city, thirsty for knowledge. How does an unserious man react to the news the party just dropped about a pack of werebears encroaching on the town? Taking one demeanor and applying a positive or negative to the onset of the encounter gives your NPCs peaks and valleys to how they behave. The surly librarian with the plot hook had a great day, but they aren't suddenly going to be nice. Also, an affable NPC having a rough day could provide a rich landscape for role-playing. A player might wonder why the usually upbeat schoolteacher is melancholy near the fountain and go ask. Likewise, an NPC that's a protector of the city might not have an interest in getting to know the players past what their abilities are and how they're helping. But, as the captain of the guard, they're integral to the player's success and have more than basic conversations. They'll carry more specific information or lore about the story. This is a huge opportunity to hook your player's emotional connection to your setting with an in-game friendship or rivalry. But it has to be beneficial to the player's good time in some capacity. When it comes to enemies, directly tying the big bad to every player can be immensely challenging. But picking a mini-boss such as a bandit leader or the underling of the great devil that the campaign itself surrounds can be very rewarding. This is where a general-purpose character may or may not graduate to a specific purpose. Depending on how encounters go or how long an enemy survives the party, it's possible that the NPC can fully emerge to become an NPC with a specific purpose. For whatever the reason, at this level, it is the value the NPC brings to the player that makes the characters important. When I ran The Curse of Strahd, one of my players had written a connection to the werewolves into his backstory. I wanted to introduce the fact that these werewolves had turned children, so in a random encounter, I included a teenage werewolf enemy. My intention was to make them sad over having fought and killed such an enemy, but in a turn of random events, they left that one alive to interrogate, not knowing that he was a teen. One of my players selfishly thought that he might be able to use this teenage werewolf to his advantage as a supernatural bodyguard. This kid wasn't long for the world in a real combat situation, and he lost his life protecting the player. This set off a chain of events that started with a rare resurrection for the setting and had long-term ramifications for the story moving forward, especially in regard to this specific player. There was a ripple effect that this Lord and Ward relationship had on the party, as well as providing a new target for the big bad, Strahd himself. This general purpose NPC meant to be an introduction to an element to the campaign and nothing more, quickly moved up a tier and found himself with a very specific purpose moving forward. Player motivation. Specific purpose NPCs. These are the named NPCs that have a major impact on the campaign, whether it be the plot beats that you've planned out or to a particular player character's arc. These characters are the ones that you've put the most work into. They've got the most developed motivations and connections to the plot, as well as your players. They move the entire story forward with their interactions with the players. They're the ones who provide the deepest lore dumps, give out the most crucial quests, and offer the deadliest challenges. Anything that you want to directly hit your players with, positive or negative, should come from characters in this tier. They are in the game with a specific and long-term purpose for your party. During your prep time, you will assign hooks, beats, and challenges specifically to these characters to trigger at points that you've determined. There should be a feeling of immense loss if these allies were to die. While nothing should ever derail a campaign, without these NPCs, the players will be without a key influence in their quest against the villain. Conversely, when these enemy NPCs are beaten, the feeling of victory should be at its peak. This is saving the town from the central focus necromancer. Do you have a paladin or a cleric in your party? Their god is at this level, and there's no better way to engage that class than through detailed descriptions of the commune spell or dreams during a long rest. The Assassin's Guild might have sent someone after the party who was successful at taking a PC out. But if the basic purpose assassin was successful with the blade, it's the specific purpose villain that sent them. I ran a 3 or 4 session adventure adapted from the 90s movie Congo in the D&D setting of Chult. I like taking old action movies from the 80s and 90s and turning them into D&D one-shots. There's no shame in borrowing inspiration for your games. It's all just for fun with you and your friends. I ran with an NPC named Herman Volka, and for me, he was the most important NPC in the adventure. This guy funded the expedition to release the gorilla back into the wild. He sought the lost city and its treasure. And I found every reason and opportunity to motivate the party through this NPC's point of view. His purpose was extremely specific. Guide the party to the lost city, although that wasn't their goal, and stoke the flames of greed within the party so they'd want to plunder the lost city for all it was worth. While he wasn't successful in plundering, and he shouldn't have been based on the characters made for the adventure, he did get them to the lost city for a very climactic fight and an escape to the Feywild, for whatever adventure to continue, if so inspired. With these 3 categories, you'll be able to help yourself keep everything straight by not bogging yourself down with unnecessary details before they're necessary to create. It's entirely possible that the characters may shift around in these categories as your campaign progresses. Say, now your player visits the baker daily and begins talking to them on a deeper level. The baker can graduate from basic purpose to the other 2 levels depending on the impact you think they can have on the player's journey. Once you've assigned your cast, the world begins to take a memorable shape that your players will seamlessly ease themselves into every session. It is incredibly rewarding as a DM to see your players awaken to the world that you've built for them. When your players don't have to reference their notes to remember names and previous interactions with NPCs, you've arrived at a game that will not only be remembered for years to come, but also attended regularly, because your players will have made real-life connections to the favorite characters that they see, just like in your favorite epic movie or on your favorite TV show.